Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who joins us from around the world. We're so glad you're here. This is Andrew and Renee. Welcome to the Stacks series.
It is wonderful to be back with you all, and we have quite the collection of research to get through today, a really fascinating stack.
Today, we are exploring sleep, circadian rhythms, and the biology of longevity. And honestly, I have to admit something right off the bat. When I saw this on our schedule, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, it just feels like we've heard it all before. The conversation about sleep always seems so standard. It's the same 3 bullet points.
Let me guess. Get your 8 hours.
Get your 8 hours, don't drink coffee after 3 p.m., maybe buy a new pillow. It's always presented as this very simple lifestyle tip like, drink more water or take the stairs instead of the elevator.
That's a really fair criticism of how it's usually covered. It's framed as this passive state. You turn off the lights, you shut down your brain, and you're just recharging, like plugging in your phone.
Exactly. You park the car in the garage, turn off the engine, and just wait for morning. But looking through the stack of papers we have today, and this is a seriously heavy stack, maybe one of the biggest we've tackled, that whole analogy isn't just a little bit off. It's completely dead wrong.
It is. The research we're going through today completely flips that passive idea on its head. Sleep isn't a shutdown at all. It's an incredibly active, a critical biological workspace.
A workspace, I like that.
Yeah, it's more like a night shift crew coming into a factory. They're there to repair the machines, to clean the floors, scrub all the toxins out of the filters, and update the central software. And if the crew doesn't show up, or they show up at the wrong time,
Then the factory doesn't just run a little slow the next day.
it falls apart. The whole system starts to degrade.
And we're not just talking about feeling a little groggy or needing an extra cup of coffee. This is way bigger than that. What we're really looking at today is the intersection of 3 massive scientific fields.
Right. You have chronobiology, which is the science of our internal body clocks.
Yeah.
You have sleep science itself. And then you have the biology of aging.
And the whole point of our conversation today is to figure out how those 3 things weave together, how they determine not just how you feel tomorrow morning, but, how long you actually live.
We're looking at the mechanics of mortality. And to really set the stage, to show you the stakes, there's one finding I think we have to pull out right from the very top.
Oh, I think I know which one you're going to mention. This one it floored me. It comes from a study on the transcriptome.
Right. So for anyone listening who needs a quick refresher, the transcriptome is basically the sum total of all the messenger RNA in your body.
Yeah.
It's the real-time instruction manual your cells are reading at any given moment.
It tells us which genes are currently switched on and are actively doing work.
Exactly. So this study found that when your sleep is properly aligned with your internal clock, when you're sleeping, when your body expects you to sleep, about 6.4% of your genes show a rhythmic pattern.
They have a beat. They turn on and off in this beautiful harmony with the day-night cycle.
And these are important genes. They regulate your metabolism, your immune system, inflammation, even DNA repair. It's a huge chunk of your operational genome.
And this is the part that is just terrifying, when you mistime your sleep. When you force your body to sleep at the wrong time, like in shift work or really bad jet lag,
The whole system collapses.
that number drops from 6.4% down to just 1%.
It's a 90% reduction in your genetic rhythm.
That's not just about being tired. That's genomic chaos. It's
Yeah.
like you have this incredible orchestra, and suddenly 90% of the musicians just stop looking at the conductor and start playing whatever they want.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And that loss of rhythm, that molecular noise, is a fundamental hallmark of the aging process itself.
So today we're going to break all of this down into 4 main parts to really get our heads around it.
First, we're going to start with the foundations. This is what we think we know. We'll look at the big data, the famous U-shaped curve of mortality, and the Goldilocks zone of how much sleep you actually need.
Then we'll get into the active debate. Because science is never totally settled, we have this huge paradox of long sleep. Is sleeping too much actually a killer? And there's a surprising controversy over the best temperature to sleep at, especially as we get older. I thought I knew the answer to that one, and I was wrong.
It's a very nuanced debate. After that, we dive into the frontiers. This is the really exciting, cutting-edge molecular stuff. We're talking sirtuins, the guardians of the genome, and the glymphatic system.
Which is basically the brain's washing machine. I love that image. Brainwashing, but, the good kind.
The very good kind, yes. And finally, we'll talk about the implications. What does all this mean for things like Alzheimer's, for how your skin ages, and for society as a whole?
Okay, let's get started. Part 1, foundations. What we think we know.
And we have to start with this massive data set from a study called NANs.
The National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. And we should stress, this isn't some small study with a dozen college students. We are talking about data from over 26,000 adults, tracked for many, many years.
The scale is absolutely crucial here. When you have that many people, it lets you filter out the noise. You can statistically control for things like smoking, diet, income, exercise, and really isolate the variable you care about, which in this case is sleep.
So a couple of different research teams, one led by Lee and another by Wang, crunched these numbers. They looked at how long people slept versus when they died. And the graph wasn't a straight line.
No, not at all. It was a very, very distinct U-shaped curve.
Okay, let's unpack that. A U-shaped curve. Visually, that means the risk of mortality is high on the left side, then it dips way down in the middle, and then it goes right back up on the other side.
That's the shape exactly. So if you look at the left side of that U, you have short sleepers. The data is incredibly clear that sleeping 5 hours or less is linked to significantly higher hazard ratios for not just all-cause mortality, but specifically cardiovascular mortality.
That part kind of makes intuitive sense to most of us, I think. If I only sleep 4 hours, I feel awful the next day. My heart is racing, I'm stressed out, I feel like my body is just running on fumes. It feels like wear and tear.
And that's exactly what it is. Your body relies on sleep for what's called autonomic recovery. It's basically a chance for your nervous system to calm down. If you cut that short, your blood pressure stays elevated, your stress hormones like cortisol don't drop properly, you are literally accelerating the damage to your system.
Okay, so too little sleep is bad. We get that. But here's where the common wisdom, the stuff we've all heard a million times, starts to get a little shaky. We all have this magic number in our heads. 8 hours.
It's the mantra, isn't it?
It's everywhere. Doctors say it, your parents say it. Is 8 hours what the data actually says is best?
The data actually points to a sweet spot that's a little bit lower than that. The bottom of that, the Goldilocks zone with the absolute lowest risk of death, is found at approximately 7 hours of sleep.
7 hours, not 8.
Closer to 7. In fact, one of the studies we looked at was incredibly specific. It pinpointed the lowest risk point at 7 to 7.32 hours.
Okay, hold on. 7.32 hours. I have to push back a little there. That seems ridiculously precise. How can we possibly know that from a survey where people are just, guessing how much they slept?
Yet you are right to be skeptical of that decimal point. It's a classic example of what happens in epidemiology. When you see a number like 7.32, it's not a prescription. It's an average that comes out of a complex statistical model.
So I don't need to set my alarm for exactly 7 hours and 19 minutes from when my head hits the pillow.
No, please don't.
Yeah.
What it tells us is that the center of gravity for longevity, the absolute nadir of that risk curve, isn't at 8 hours. It's clustered much closer to 7.
So if I'm consistently getting a solid 7 hours, I'm actually doing better for my long-term health than someone who's forcing themselves to stay in bed for 9 hours every night.
According to this massive population data, yes. Once you start pushing past 8 hours, and especially when you get into the 9 or 10-hour range, you start climbing up the right side of that U-shaped curve.
And you're back in the danger zone.
You are. The data consistently shows that people sleeping 9 hours or more often have a higher mortality risk than even the short sleepers.
And that's the part that always just breaks people's brains. It's so counterintuitive. We think of sleep as this purely restorative thing, so more should be better, right? It's like, if some vitamins are good for you, more vitamins must be even better.
It's a classic example of nonlinear biology. Most things in our bodies follow this Goldilocks principle. A little stress is good for you, too much is debilitating. Water is essential, but you can actually die from drinking too much. Sleep appears to be exactly the same. There's an optimal dose.
You mentioned biological aging a minute ago. I want to dig into that because
Yeah.
the sources bring up this concept of phenotypic age or pheno-age. I love this idea because it scientifically validates how I feel on a Monday morning versus a Friday afternoon.
It's a really crucial distinction in modern aging research. We all have a chronological age.
Yeah.
That's just the number of candles on your birthday cake. It's a fixed number based on time.
How many times the Earth has gone around the sun since I was born?
Right. But your phenotypic age is a measure of how fast your body is actually degrading. It's a measure of your biological wear and tear.
So how do they even measure something like that? It's not just looking at gray hair and wrinkles, I assume.
No, it's much more sophisticated. It's based on a panel of biomarkers from a simple blood test. They look at things like your albumin levels, creatinine for kidney function, your blood glucose, C-reactive protein for inflammation, lymphocyte counts. A whole panel of things.
So they take your blood, run these tests, plug the numbers into a special algorithm, and it spits out an age.
Essentially, yes. It calculates your mortality risk relative to the average person of your chronological age. So you might be 50 years old on your driver's license, but if your inflammation is constantly high and your kidney function is a bit off because you've been sleeping 4 hours a night for a decade, your pheno age might be 60.
So you've literally aged yourself an extra 10 years.
Biologically, you have. And the study by Wang and his colleagues showed a direct, powerful correlation here. Short sleep accelerates that biological clock. Your sleep duration is a behavior that directly influences the rate at which your cells are degrading.
It's like driving your car at 100 miles per hour all the time. The odometer might only say 50,000 miles, but the engine, the brakes, the transmission, they all look like they've done 100,000 because of the stress you put on them.
That is a perfect analogy. And this brings us to the even bigger picture here, this idea of the universal clock.
The circadian rhythms. We touched on this in the intro with that transcriptome study, but let's go deeper. The sources are really clear that this isn't just a sleep-wake cycle.
No, and that's probably the most common misunderstanding. People think of the circadian rhythm as just the thing that makes you sleepy at night and awake in the morning, like a simple on-off switch for your brain.
But it's actually a cellular cycle. What does that mean?
It means that almost every single cell in your body, your liver cells, your skin cells, your heart muscle cells, the cells lining your gut, they all have their own internal clock machinery.
So my liver knows what time it is.
Your liver knows what time it is.
Yeah.
Your pancreas knows what time it is. And that tiny little clock, that wristwatch in each cell, dictates its schedule for the day. It tells a liver cell when to be most active in processing fats and when it should switch to repairing its own internal DNA.
So it anticipates the day, knows I usually eat breakfast around 8 a.m., so it starts ramping up the necessary metabolic enzymes at 7:30 a.m. to get ready.
Precisely. And this cellular rhythm orchestrates everything. Your hormone-released testosterone peaks in the morning, cortisol peaks in the morning to wake you up, melatonin rises at night to make you sleepy, your metabolism, your immune function, your immune cells are more active at night. Cellular repair, it's all tightly scheduled.
Okay, so what happens when we ignore that schedule, when we live out of sync with it? You know, staying up until 3 a.m., staring at a bright screen, eating a huge meal at midnight.
That's a state we call chronodisruption. It happens when your central clock, which is in a part of your brain called the SCN, becomes misaligned with all those peripheral clocks in your body's cells, or when your entire system is misaligned with the external light-dark cycle.
And the result is that efficiency just plummets.
It does. Think about it from the cell's perspective. If the liver cell schedule says it's 2 a.m. and time to run the DNA repair protocols, but you just ate a giant cheeseburger, it gets conflicting signals. It has to drop the repair job and switch to emergency metabolic duty.
So can't do either job well.
It can't. And when that happens night after night, the damage starts to accumulate. This is the root of so many age-related diseases. It's that constant low-level internal chaos.
It's like that orchestra again. The conductor's trying to lead a symphony, but the percussion section thinks it's time for a jazz solo. It just creates noise.
And eventually, the whole performance grinds to a halt.
Okay, so that's the foundation. 7 hours is the sweet spot. Short sleep literally ages you faster. And our entire biology runs on this incredibly intricate 24-hour rhythm. But the data isn't always so clean and simple, which brings us right to part 2, the active debate.
This is where science disagrees, or at least where the interpretation of the data gets really complicated and interesting.
Let's go right back to that U-shaped curve, that right side of the U, the long sleep paradox. We get why sleeping only 2 hours is bad for you, your system is just running on empty, but why is sleeping 10 hours a day linked to a higher risk of death? Is sleep actually toxic in high doses? Because on a Sunday morning, sleeping in feels like the best thing in the world. Is that actually dangerous?
This is genuinely one of the biggest and most active debates in sleep epidemiology.
Oh.
The raw data shows the correlation, and it's very strong. Long sleep is associated with higher mortality. But, as any scientist will tell you, correlation does not equal causation.
Right. Just because two things happen together doesn't mean one is causing the other.
Exactly. And the leading theory, which the sources we have really lean into, is that long sleep might not be the weapon itself. It might be the distress signal.
A distress signal. Okay, explain that. What do you mean?
Well, think about when you naturally sleep the most in your life. It's usually when you have the flu, right? Or when you're recovering from an injury or a surgery. Your body's immune system actively makes you tired and forces you to sleep when it's fighting something.
That's true. If I'm sick, I can sleep for 12 hours straight and still feel tired.
Exactly. So in these big population studies, when they ask someone, on average, how much do you sleep? And that person says 10 hours a day. The big question is, why do they need 10 hours? They might have an undiagnosed chronic condition, they might be fighting a low-grade infection, or dealing with clinical depression, or have chronic fatigue syndrome.
So the long sleep isn't what's killing them. The underlying illness is what's killing them, and the extended sleep is just a symptom of that illness.
That's the leading hypothesis. We call it reverse causality. The sources point to inflammation as being a key link. We see that long sleepers tend to have elevated levels of C-reactive protein, or CRP, and interleukin-6. These are key blood markers of systemic inflammation.
So the body is on fire, metaphorically speaking,
Yeah.
and it's forcing the person to stay in bed to try and put out the flames.
That's a great way to put it. We also see that sleep over 9 hours is associated with metabolic problems, like insulin resistance, and a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. But again, is the sleep causing the insulin resistance, or is the metabolic syndrome making the person feel sluggish and lethargic, causing them to sleep more?
It's the classic chicken and the egg problem.
It is. But there's another huge factor here, and that's sleep quality. This is critical. Someone might be physically in bed for 10 hours, from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. But if they have a condition like sleep apnea, where they might stop breathing hundreds of times a night without realizing it,
They aren't actually getting 10 hours of sleep.
they might only be getting 4 or 5 hours of actual restorative sleep. The rest of the time, their body is in a state of constant stress and arousal, waking up just enough to breathe.
That makes so much sense. So on the survey, they look like a long sleeper, but biologically, their body's experiencing all the damage of being a chronic short sleeper.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the takeaway here isn't to panic if you're a healthy person who enjoys sleeping in on a Saturday. That's probably fine. But if you find that you need 10 or 11 hours of sleep every single day just to function, that's a red flag. It's a symptom that you and your doctor should investigate, not necessarily a habit that you need to break by forcing yourself up with a 5 a.m. alarm.
Okay, now let's get into another fight. This one is very practical. The temperature tussle.
Ah, yes, the eternal battle of the thermostat.
The general wisdom, and I mean, I hear this on every health podcast, I see it on social media, is sleep cool. They say you should crank your thermostat down to 65 degrees, maybe even 60. You're supposed to hibernate like a bear. But the sources, particularly from the Mather Institute, suggest this might actually be terrible advice for some people.
Specifically for older adults, yes. This is a perfect example of how one-size-fits-all health advice can go wrong. That general recommendation of, say, 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 to 19 Celsius is generally great for younger, metabolically active adults. We generate a lot of our own body heat.
But for older adults, the story is different.
It is. The research found that for community-dwelling older adults, the optimal sleep temperature range might be significantly warmer. We're talking 68 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit.
78 degrees, that sounds like a sauna to me. I can't imagine trying to sleep in a room that warm. It'd be a puddle of sweat.
To you, perhaps. But we have to look at the physiology of aging. As we get older, our basal metabolic rate slows down. We just don't produce as much heat when we're at rest. We also tend to lose subcutaneous fat. That's the layer of fat right under the skin that acts as natural insulation.
And their skin gets thinner, too. So an older person in a 65-degree room doesn't feel pleasantly cool. They just feel cold.
They're freezing. You have to think about what your body does when it's cold. It initiates what are called thermoregulatory defenses to preserve heat. You might start to shiver, even subtly. Your blood vessels, especially in your hands and feet, constrict. That's called vasoconstriction.
And that puts more strain on your heart, doesn't it? Your heart has to pump harder to push blood through those narrowed vessels.
It increases blood pressure and it activates the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response. That is a state of stress. You simply cannot enter deep, restorative, relaxed sleep if your body is actively fighting to stay warm. It's physiologically impossible.
That is just fascinating. So all this well-meaning advice to crank down the AC might actually be a major cause of insomnia and poor sleep quality in the elderly population.
It very well could be. It's a powerful reminder that we need to personalize our health advice. Biology changes dramatically across the lifespan. What works for a 30-year-old biohacker could be genuinely harmful to their 80-year-old grandparent.
So if you're visiting your grandparents and their house feels a little toasty at night, maybe don't complain about it. They're just following their biology.
Let them control the thermostat. It's probably better for their sleep and their health.
Okay, one more debate before we move on to the frontier section. The glymphatic system, we're going to get into the details of how it works in a minute because it's so cool, but there's a debate about when it works.
Right, so the glymphatic system is this amazing waste clearance system in the brain. The dominant theory is that it works almost exclusively during sleep. But the active debate is, how exclusive is it? Does it happen during other states of unconsciousness, like anesthesia?
Because if it does, maybe we should all just get a little dose of anesthetic gas for a power nap.
I mean, if I could get 8 hours worth of brain cleaning done in 1 hour, that sounds pretty efficient.
That's laughing. Please do not try that at home. Anesthesia is a very complex and, frankly, a pretty blunt instrument. The research so far suggests that anesthesia is not the same as natural sleep. The brainwave patterns are completely different.
So it's not just about being unconscious, it's about the type of unconsciousness.
Exactly. The current consensus, based on the sources we have, is that the glymphatic clearance process is most active during very specific stages of sleep, namely deep non-REM sleep or slow-wave sleep. So the custodial staff that cleans the brain only comes in when the building is dark, quiet, and in a specific state of shutdown. If you're unconscious but your neurons are firing chaotically, like they do under anesthesia, the doors to the hallways stay locked.
That's the idea. The trash doesn't get taken out. And this raises big questions about common sleep aids, too. Many sedatives are very effective at knocking you out, but they don't necessarily induce the natural, deep, slow-wave sleep architecture that the brain needs for this cleaning cycle.
So you could be unconscious for 8 hours, but you wake up and the trash is still piled up in the hallways of your brain.
Precisely. You've had sedation, but not true restoration.
Okay, that is a perfect segue into part 3, frontiers. This is where we look at the actual machinery. We know sleep is important. We know about 7 hours is the target. But how does it actually keep us young? What is happening at the molecular level?
This is where things get really exciting. And we have to start by talking about a very special protein called SIRT-T1.
RST1, the guardian of the genome. It sounds like the title of a superhero movie.
It really does act like a superhero within the cell. So technically, SIRT-T1 is what's called a NAD+ dependent deacetylase.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Let's break that down. NAD+ is that molecule involved in energy metabolism, right? I see supplements for it advertised everywhere these days.
Yes, NAD+ is absolutely fundamental for creating cellular energy. It's like the high-octane fuel for all the cell's little engines.
Yeah.
And AT1 is an enzyme that requires NAD+ to do its job. It uses it as a cofactor.
And what is its main job? What does this guardian do?
One of its most critical roles is acting as a bridge. It connects your metabolism, how much energy you have, with your circadian clock.
So it's the link between what I'm eating and what time it is.
Precisely. It creates this beautiful feedback loop. On one hand, ADT1 helps to regulate the core clock genes themselves, the master gears of that cellular wristwatch, specifically genes called BMAL1 and KLOC, but in turn, the clock's rhythm helps to regulate the activity of SIRT-T1.
So it's a circle. They help each other maintain the rhythm.
It's a virtuous cycle, but here's the problem. It's a well-established fact of aging that as we get older, our cellular levels of NAD+ decline, they just drop steadily.
And since ART-T1 needs NAD+ to function,
The SIRT-T1 activity goes down with it, the guardian gets tired, it runs out of fuel, it can't do its job as effectively.
and what happens to the clock when the guardian isn't there?
The clock starts to, well, rust. It loses its precision. The gears start to slip. The rhythm becomes weak and fragmented. This is a profound molecular explanation for why older adults so often experience fragmented sleep. They wake up at 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. They feel sleepy during the day.
So that classic old person sleep isn't just a quirky part of getting old or having to use the bathroom more. It's a sign of a fundamental molecular failure in the clock mechanism.
That's right. And this gives us a huge aha moment. It suggests a potential therapeutic target. If we can find ways to boost NAD+ levels as we age, maybe through diet, through lifestyle interventions like exercise or fasting, or maybe through NAD+ precursor supplements, we might be able to refuel SIRT-T1.
And wind the clock back up. Restore the precision.
That's the hope. We could potentially tighten up that circadian rhythm and bring back more youthful, consolidated sleep patterns. It's about fixing the watch itself, not just taking a pill to force it to stop ticking for a few hours.
And the consequences of not fixing that watch are laid bare in that transcriptome study we mentioned at the start. I want to circle back to that because the way they did that study was just insane.
The forced desynchrony protocol, it's a classic in circadian research.
Yeah, talk us through that. It sounds like a form of mild torture.
It's definitely not comfortable for the participants. What the researchers do is they put human subjects on a 28-hour day schedule.
A 28-hour day, so they're forced to stay awake for longer, sleep for longer, and their whole schedule just keeps shifting relative to the sun.
Exactly. Imagine your day is 28 hours long. You might sleep for 9 or 10 hours and be awake for 18 or 19. Because the real world is still on a 24-hour cycle, your sleep time is constantly drifting. On day 1, you're sleeping at night. A few days later, you're trying to sleep in the middle of the afternoon. Then it's the morning.
So they're basically living in a state of permanent, severe jet lag. Their internal clock is completely out of sync with their sleep-wake behavior.
That's the whole point. It allows the scientists to decouple the influence of the circadian clock from the influence of just being asleep or awake. And while they're in this state, they take frequent blood samples to look at their RNA, their transcriptomes.
And this is where that shocking statistic came from. In the aligned condition, when they slept in sync with their body clock, 6.4% of their genes showed that healthy rhythm. When they were in the mistimed condition, just 1%.
It's a molecular wipeout.
Yeah.
And you have to think about what that really means. We're not just talking about genes that control sleepiness. We're talking about the genes that control your metabolism, your immune response, your cell's ability to repair its own DNA.
So when you sleep at the wrong time, if you're a shift worker or just have severe social jet lag, you are effectively erasing the rhythmic programming of your entire physiology.
It's molecular confusion. The cells are getting conflicting messages. The clock on the wall says 3 a.m., but the sun is shining. The schedule says repair DNA, but you're eating a sandwich. So the cells just devile.
Yeah.
They stop doing their scheduled tasks effectively. Is it time to clean the floor? I don't know. The lights are on, but the schedule says it's midnight. I'll just sit here and wait for clear instructions.
And while it's waiting, the damage just accumulates. Which brings us perfectly to the dishwasher of the brain, the glymphatic system.
Let's get into the mechanics of this because it's one of the most beautiful biological systems I think we've ever discussed.
We teased it earlier, but let's really detail how the brain washes itself. Because I remember from biology class that the brain is unique. It doesn't have a lymphatic system like the rest of the body to clear out waste.
That's correct. For decades, it was a huge mystery. How does this incredibly metabolically active organ, the brain, get rid of its trash? And then, relatively recently, a team led by Macon Niedergard discovered this incredible system that uses cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, to literally pump through the brain tissue and wash away metabolic waste products.
But the key to how it works is physical. The sources say that brain cells actually shrink. That just sounds wild.
It's astounding. It specifically involves a type of glial cell called an astrocyte. These are the support cells that surround and nourish your neurons. During deep, slow-wave sleep, these astrocytes physically shrink in size.
They shrink like a sponge that you squeeze the water out of.
They reduce their volume. And by doing that, they increase the amount of space between the cells, what's called the interstitial space, by about 60%.
60%. That is a massive change in the brain's physical architecture.
It is a profound change. Imagine a dense, crowded city like Manhattan during the day. The streets are packed with cars and people. It's impossible for street sweepers to get through and clean anything.
Right, total gridlock.
Now imagine that at 3 a.m., every building in the city shrank to half its normal size. Suddenly, the streets are enormous, wide-open boulevards.
And the cleaning crews can finally come in and do their work.
Exactly. The buildings, the astrocytes shrink, the streets, the interstitial space widen, and the water trucks, which is the CSF, come rushing through these special channels to flush out all the debris that accumulated during the day.
And what is this debris? What is the specific trash that's being washed out?
It's all sorts of metabolic waste. But most critically, it's proteins like beta amyloid and tau.
The bad guys.
The absolute hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. These proteins are a natural byproduct of your brain working. Every time you think a thought, every time a neuron fires, you produce a tiny little bit of this waste. If it isn't washed away efficiently every night, it starts to stick together. It clumps up and forms the infamous plaques and tangles that destroy the brain in Alzheimer's.
So if you don't get enough of that deep, slow-wave sleep, if you don't get to the stage where the cells shrink and the floodgates open, the trash stays in the streets.
And it accumulates. Night after night, year after year, decade after decade. This is why poor sleep efficiency is now considered one of the strongest modifiable risk factors for cognitive decline and dementia. Sleep is a non-negotiable neuroprotective scrub for your brain.
It makes you look at the culture of pulling an all-nighter so differently. You aren't just making yourself tired. You are actively choosing to let toxic garbage pile up in your brain because you refuse to let the cleaning crew do its job.
That's a stark but accurate way to put it. And what's even more amazing is that this infrastructure for a long and healthy life is built very, very early on. We can even see it in lower organisms. We have to talk about the worms and the fruit flies.
I always love when we get to talk about Drosophila. What can a tiny fruit fly possibly tell us about human longevity?
A surprising amount. A lot of the core genetic pathways for aging and circadian rhythms are remarkably conserved. A couple of fascinating studies looked at what's called developmental sleep.
Sleep when they're basically babies or larvae.
Exactly. For example, the nematode worm C. elegans enters a sleep-like state called lethargus during its developmental molts. It's a period of intense stillness and quiet.
And what happens if you disrupt that? If you poke the sleeping worm?
If you disturb this lethargus state, you trigger massive cellular stress responses, specifically something called the unfolded protein response, which is a sign that proteins are being built incorrectly and are misfolding, which is highly toxic to the cell.
And does that early life sleep disruption affect how long the worm ultimately lives?
Drastically. The quality and quantity of sleep during these early developmental stages is one of the strongest predictors of the organism's final lifespan. If they don't sleep well as teenager worms, they die much younger, even if their sleep as an adult is perfectly normal. The damage is already done.
That is profound. It suggests that sleep isn't just about daily maintenance. It's about construction. It's building the biological infrastructure for a long, resilient life before we even reach adulthood.
It builds a robust and resilient system. If you build the foundation of a house poorly, it doesn't matter how nicely you paint it later, it's going to collapse sooner.
Okay, so we've established the 7-hour rule, the danger of long sleep as an inflammatory signal, the brainwashing cycle, and the importance of sleep right from the beginning of life. Now let's get to part 4. Implications. What does all of this mean for us right now in our modern world?
It forces us to completely rethink our environment. One of the sources introduces this concept of the chronoexposome.
The chronoexposome sounds like the title of a sci-fi thriller.
It's a concept from the journal Frontiers in Aging. It basically argues that our rate of aging is determined by the continuous interaction between our internal time, our circadian clock, and our external exposures. And the single most powerful external exposure is light.
We tend to think of light as just a utility. It helps us see in the dark. I flip a switch, the room gets bright. But the sources argue we need to treat light as a drug.
Absolutely. Light is a potent biological signal. It's a hormone regulator. Light at night, what scientists call ALAN, is particularly powerful. It directly suppresses your body's production of melatonin and disrupts that whole SIRT-1 clock machinery we just talked about. We need to treat our light exposure with the same seriousness that we treat our nutrition.
So staring at your bright phone screen at 11 p.m. isn't just a bad habit like biting your nails. It's the equivalent of taking a stimulant drug that actively damages your internal clock.
And by damaging that clock, it cripples your body's ability to repair itself. Let's look at a really tangible example. Skin health.
This will appeal to the vanity in all of us.
Yeah.
Is beauty sleep a real scientific thing? Does sleeping well actually make you look younger?
Literally, yes. At the DNA level, there's a critical protein called XPA. This protein is essential for a process called nucleotide excision repair, which is your skin's primary mechanism for fixing DNA damage caused by UV radiation from the sun.
The damage that leads to wrinkles and skin cancer?
Exactly. But here's the catch. The production of the XPA protein is controlled by the circadian clock. Its levels in your skin cells oscillate throughout the day. They are high at certain times and low at others.
So our skin's ability to repair itself from sun damage actually changes depending on the time of day.
Yes. And if your circadian clock is disrupted by mistimed sleep, by shift work, by too much light at night, that rhythmic production of XPA gets thrown into disarray, you might end up with low repair capacity right when you need it the most after being out in the sun.
And the result of that is?
Accumulated DNA damage.
Visibly, over time, that manifests as photoaging, more wrinkles, more sunspots, loss of elasticity. Invisibly, it's a significantly increased risk for skin cancer.
That brings a whole new meaning to beauty sleep. It's actually DNA repair sleep.
It is. And this concept extends from our individual bodies to the structure of our entire society. We have to talk about the massive economic and social cost of what's called social jet lag. Social jet lag, I love that term. That's the gap between when your body's clock wants you to sleep and wake and when your alarm clock forces you to sleep and wake.
Exactly. It's the chronic misalignment between your biological time and social time.
And we punish people for this, don't we? Our society idolizes the early riser. The early bird gets the worm. If you're up at 5 a.m. answering emails and going for a run, you're seen as disciplined and successful. If you prefer to sleep until 10 a.m., you're branded as lazy.
But biology tells us that this is just variation. We have different chronotypes. Some people are genetically programmed larks or morning people. Others are genetically owls or evening people. Forcing a true night owl to wake up at 6 a.m. every single day is not an issue of discipline. It is a form of chronic biological torture.
You're essentially forcing their body into that 1% rhythmic gene expression scenario we talked about at the very beginning, day in and day out.
Yes. And the data links social jet lag to higher rates of obesity, metabolic syndrome, depression, and cognitive decline. We are making a huge portion of our population sick by ignoring their fundamental biology.
So a more chrono-aware society would embrace things like flexible start times for work and school.
Ideally, yes. The evidence suggests it would lead to massive improvements in public health and probably in productivity, too. If you let the night owl work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., they aren't just happier. Their SIRT1 is working better, their lymphatic system is clearing waste more efficiently, and their skin is repairing its DNA properly.
And finally, this all points to the future of medicine. The sources mention chronotherapy. This sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It's the logical next frontier. If we know that all these cellular processes are rhythmic, that enzymes for drug metabolism in your liver are more active at certain times, that cancer cells divide more at certain times, then the time of day you administer a drug should matter a lot.
Right. If the enzyme that a drug targets is only awake and active at 4 p.m., then taking that pill with breakfast at 8 a.m. might be completely useless.
Or, even worse, it could be more toxic, because the pathways to clear the drug aren't active yet. Chronotherapy is the practice of timing drug administration to the body's circadian rhythms to maximize the efficacy and minimize the side effects. The future of medicine has to be four-dimensional. It has to include time.
That's a massive paradigm shift. It changes the prescription from take once a day to take it precisely 14 photo hours.
And for things like chemotherapy or blood pressure medications, the early data suggests it could drastically improve outcomes and reduce devastating side effects.
Wow. Okay, let's try to summarize this incredible stack. This has been, well, it's been an awakening.
Chuckles, I see what you did there.
So first, sleep is not passive rest. It's the active foundation of phenotypic youth. If you want to stay biologically young, you have to prioritize this active repair and cleaning time.
And the big data gives us a clear benchmark to aim for. That 7-hour mark really does seem to be the sweet spot for minimizing mortality and biological aging.
And now we understand the mechanisms. It's about brainwashing through the lymphatic system, literally shrinking cells to power wash the gunk that leads to Alzheimer's. And it's about gene maintenance, conducted by SIRT1, which needs to stay fueled up to keep the rhythm.
And finally, it's this profound realization that timing is everything. Light is a drug that sets our clock, and our modern world is constantly overdosing us at the wrong time. We have to start working with our biology, not constantly fighting against it.
Absolutely. It's about listening to your internal clock instead of just the one on the wall. Before we wrap up, thank you to all our partners, sponsors, and scholars who made this podcast and the research possible. We're truly grateful for your support.
And to our listeners, thank you for being part of this journey with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow Stack Studios for more informative content and support us in Patreon.
Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and let the search for wisdom guide you forward. Have a great day.